Better Buildings for Humans is powered by Advanced Glazings, makers of the Solera line of products. Solera is the leading glass glazing made specifically for architectural daylighting and with extreme insulation performance. Learn more at advancedglazings.com.
Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Better Buildings for Humans. This is the podcast where we look at the impact that the built environment has on our health, our wellness, our productivity, and our just general joy of being alive. And of course, we always to talk about sustainable design as well. Today, we are going far off the shores of Nova Scotia, and I want to introduce you to Peter Sandiford, coming all the way from Barbados. Peter, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. So let's start, Peter, by having you tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your background and specifically the path that led you to Habitats Architectural Design, your firm.
Right. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, well, my days, I guess, started typically like most West Indian boys growing up in tropics. But I was blessed with the affirmation that I knew that I was going to be an architect from the age of 13. I went through that thing of being a marine biologist because I care about the environment and I love swimming. But when I got the taste of physics and math and art, it was a kind of a no-brainer for me to go from there in the field of architecture. So from early o'clock, I knew what I wanted to do. I knew that I was going to be working for myself, and I knew that I was going to be working from home. So I'm actually the happiest pig in the farm right now because I'm pretty much doing what I dreamt of doing from an early age. So I basically tailored all of my subjects to get to this moment, right? Like I said, I did physics, I did math, chemistry. So I did all the sciences, but then I also took fine art, which was kind of a spoke in a wheel in terms of the academic scheduling, because once I got to college, I couldn't do those subjects at the same time during the day. So I was one of those forever collegers. I was always at college. So I had the math and the physics in the mornings and the afternoons, and I had to wait till the evenings to do the art classes, the art degree, or the art course. But that paid dividends down the road because after I finished my first undergrad at St. Mary's in Halifax, I already had my portfolio. I had all the artwork ready to apply. I was still doing the physics and the math and the chemistry at university, but I just needed a portfolio to get into the architecture program. And so I was fortunate enough to be able to just pull those images up and create a portfolio. And that led me onto the path that I am today.
Oh, that's amazing. It's got to be a beautiful thing to have recognized your calling at such a young age. I'm pushing 60 and I'm still not quite sure what I want to do with my life, but hats off to you on that one. And you mentioned university, which leads into my next question I wanted to ask you about. I'm also a graduate of TUNS, which stands for Technical University of Nova Scotia.
Yes.
In Halifax, we didn't quite overlap. We talked about that off air before we started. We didn't quite overlap, but TUNS is now part of Dalhousie University. So it's Dalhousie Architecture and Dalhousie Engineering. But you and I are both from the TUNS days. Let's talk about your education in Nova Scotia. You went to St. Mary's University in Halifax and then TUNS in Halifax. Is there anything from that experience that you're particularly thankful for?
Well, I would say utmost and foremost is the weather. I have to say, I love tropical weather more than I thought I did. The winters were brutal. The summers were short-lived. The rain was constant. So weather-wise, it was definitely an opener for me. I mean, I've traveled before. I'd seen winter before and whatnot, but I hadn't lived it for months on end. And as you would know, those Caledonian winters are very harsh. They're damp. They're wet. They get into your bones. So for me, that was the big thing in terms of weather. But I would say the best part were the people that I met. Haligonians Canadians in general, but Haligonians in particular, they have a special warmth in their hearts. They're very nice, very kind. I never felt like an outsider, to be honest, when I was there. And I still have friends from Halifax to this day, good friends that we keep in touch with. And I travel, they come down here. So I would say people would be the biggest takeaway for me. Of course, the educational experience blessing. I met a lot of West Indians as well, actually. Funny enough, when I went to St. Mary's, St. Mary's and Dalhousie, they kind of shared this Caribbean annual gathering called Caravan, I think it was called. And so we took part in creating backdrops and little costumes, like doing like a carnival session like once a year, and just linemen, as we would say. So the other West Indians from St. Kitts, Antigua, Trinidad, St. Lucia, Grenada, I'm still in touch with all of those people today. And again, people that I would say would be the biggest takeaway for me. And my love of seafood. I think I had my first set of mussels in Peggy's Cove.
Ah, fantastic. And what a place to have them.
Yeah.
For anybody who doesn't know, Peggy's Cove is a pretty extraordinary geographical feature just outside of Halifax, Nova Scotia. It's worth checking out for sure. I want to talk about architecture in Barbados. I mean, that's the main reason that you're on the show. Let's go right into that. Just take some time. Let's talk about things that you would find in a home or a building in Barbados that you would not find in Canada, America, Western Europe. What are the things that are unique?
Well, if you look at both sides, the things that you won't see and the things that you will see.
Okay, yeah.
So you won't see the insulation. You won't see, the snow load bar calculations required for roof and wall connections, right?
Right.
Cross foundation detailings and those kind of things you won't see. But what you will see would be things like larger windows, larger terraces. That relationship to the indoor and outdoor, even when people talk about open plan, I would say we've been open planning designing for years, because when you open the doors, you just want the inside and the outside to just bleed straight through. You want to have large rooms where the heat can escape, tall ceilings where the heat can rise and dissipate. So large windows, large doors, big terraces. For me, living in the tropics is living outdoors. And so even things like outdoor showers, that's a norm, that's a standard for me. I like to incorporate those kinds of things where possible, because it's fantastic. If it's raining, you're going to get wet anyway. And it's not cold rain, it's not cold water that you're getting wet with. Although everything's relative, I will say that. Everything's relative. But yeah, it's that kind of open ear, running out onto the terraces and having use your lawn as part of your house, and large terraces as part of the indoors, outdoor kitchens. You'll see those kinds of things here more so, probably more so now. I mean, it's been a few years for me, but trends do tend to come and go. But I would say that would be the main thing.
One of my favorite things too about being in the Caribbean or West Indies is just that, or anywhere in the tropics, is that ability to just leave the door open. Like, what a beautiful thing. I'll always love that. And the idea of sitting outside to enjoy a meal is, it's always a beautiful thing. We, as you pointed out earlier, we've probably got about a 3 to 4 month window where you can actually sit outside to eat in Nova Scotia. And for the rest of the year, it's just not an option.
No.
I will say that the weather has improved a little bit up here, just for the record. As the result of the changing climate, being where we're located, winters are a bit less harsh for sure, and they're a bit shorter. That comes with some negatives.
I did notice that, actually. My son is actually studying at Waterloo.
Oh, fantastic.
When I took him up a couple of years ago, his first winter was nothing. I don't think he even put on his winter jacket. That would have been 2 or so winters ago. And I noticed that, just talking to friends and just seeing the weather. Definitely not as cold as when I was there. I'm like, this guy is something else. He brought the sun to Canada with him.
We appreciate that very much. So let's talk about, the changes in the climate. Is it impacting Barbados and Barbadian architecture at all?
Oh, for sure. I think it's a global thing, to be honest, Joe. I mean, as you said, here, we don't have to worry about snow, but we have to worry about hurricanes.
Right.
When it comes to weather. And any kind of climate resiliency is now becoming more and more important, because, storms are becoming stronger. I believe they're now looking for a Category 6 hurricane depilation now, or Category 5 is just, it's not enough. The winds are that strong. So definitely there is an impact on what we do building code, patterns, and how things are tightened down with the roof. But also, you have to look at, let's say your structure survives. Okay, so engineering-wise, you can get that done. It's not difficult. But what happens if the electricity is off? We're a small island. Well, most of the islands are small. So if the power goes off, it can take a week or more to get back up. If the water goes out, there's a damage to the generator for the water supply, then there's no water. And so what you're finding now, one of the things I've been doing for a number of years, to be honest, is, even though it's not an architectural element, which there are, but things like generators or standard water tanks or standard photovoltaic cells. Now, the photovoltaic cells will have an impact on your design, of course,
How
right?
so? Can you elaborate on that?
Well, you've got to provide space for them to be
Yeah.
installed,
Yeah.
right? And unless you like the look of the panels, you design the home in such a way that you don't necessarily see them. At least for me, I don't necessarily
Okay.
want to see the panels. So flat roof areas or parapet walls, you might want to start incorporating those kind of, even though and those are traditional elements too architecturally, because the plantation homes would have had parapet walls around the gable roofs and the hip roofs that they would have had back in the 1600s, right, the 17th century. But things like the hoods over windows, shutters, and louvers over windows, those are things that are, let's say, are vernacular architectural elements that the modern design, which is what everybody's moving towards these days, they don't want those extras, right? Modern design, you're looking for cleaner lines, less frill. You just want simple, clean lines. Whereas hoods, shutters, louvers, those things are textured, right? There's an extra layer of texture materials that you don't see on a modern home. So even though you see a trending towards that on the higher market, the higher income level residential projects, they're not necessarily meant for tropical environments where a lot of rain, you have to protect windows and doors from the rain, the sun comes through, and of course, high winds with hurricane, that would help protect the windows. So you can put shutters in for the rain, shutters in for flying objects, the hoods for the rain and the heat. Those elements are traditional elements that in a lot of cases we're losing because everybody's going towards these cleaner lines, this modern look, which is kind of unfortunate because it's changing the character of what, when people come on vacation, especially, they're coming for that Caribbean vibe. And if they're seeing modern Miami or South Beach or California, LA designs down here, then it kind of defeats the purpose, in my opinion,
Is there a way to hold on to that, to the traditional vibe, the vernacular?
Client wants it, you got to do it, buddy. We can advise as best we could, but that's a trend right now. I would say for me, I've done one or two modern designs, but for the most part, I think people respect the vernacular style. So even when, most of my clients are from overseas anyhow, so they're looking for that more traditional chattel house type of look with a modern twist with materiality that we're using. But, you get a lot of younger clients who have the disposable income. They're buying into the golf courses and the gated communities, but they want modern designs, clean lines. But I'm not sure how resilient they will be. Yes, they have concrete roofs, most of them, which is great. But then again, you got a heat trap situation going on because a concrete roof, as structurally sound as it is, when that sun is coming down on it at night, that heat has to go somewhere. So it kind of then comes back down into the space, and it can make the house or the office or whatever very hot. So I don't think people think a lot of these things through to the end and the everyday practicality of it when they're designing and insisting on having these certain design elements or modern styles.
Okay, so let's keep going on that idea. And specifically, let's talk about light and brightness in the interior spaces. I've been to some tropical places or even in Middle East where spaces in the interior are relatively dark, and they're very much accustomed to, I'll call it darker architecture, where the sun is purposely kept out in order to deal with solar heat gain. Is that the case at all in Barbadian? It certainly doesn't look like it based on your backdrop.
Oh, yeah. So, no. I would think like my home was a 60s home, 70s home. And, back then architecture wasn't really the forefront of residential housing. The older homes, I find that the plantation houses, they have large, like 8-foot high doors and 7-foot doors, windows and sash windows, that are quite tall and wide. And so the whole idea was to let the air flow through. Okay. Because we also have to deal with damp, right? Moisture, the humidity. So if you keep a room enclosed without good ventilation, you're going to get a lot of damp. It's going to be moldy. It's not going to be good to breathe that air in. So you'll find that, what's happening now, even with contemporary homes, larger windows, definitely not dark spaces. Nobody wants a dark space these days. They want light, airy, open feeling. That's what they want to generate.
Manage the connection between building occupants and the outside world using Solera translucent glass. Learn more at advancedglazings.com.
Oh, wonderful. That's great to hear. You'd mentioned that, the islands are relatively small. To what extent are you able to work with local materials versus imports?
Well, unfortunately, Barbados is one of those islands. We're not very rich in our materials. We don't have a lot of natural resources when it comes to materials. So we make our concrete here, but that's basically it. Everything else pretty much has to be imported. So whether the windows are coming down in PVC extrusions or aluminum extrusions, they're assembled here in Barbados. Wood, of course, would have to be bespoke, so they're made to custom. But pretty much everything has to be imported.
You mentioned the wood, I'm sorry, but do you use any sort of local woods at all, or is that no? Okay.
No, yeah, we don't really have a forest there. So
Okay.
Our wood would come from mostly like Guyana, which is a densely forested neighboring country. Of course, we can get wood from anywhere in the world, but pretty much everything has to be imported. Even the sand for the construction now, that has to be imported.
Okay. Yeah,
the sand we have here, you can't build with, right? That white beach sand, that's perfect for walking on and having sunset views, but it's not good to build with.
Oh, that's heartbreaking. My heart just bleeds for you with your beautiful, with your beautiful white sand.
That shell sand, it really isn't good for construction. Pink sand is terrible.
Okay, let's switch away from Barbados for a minute. Let's talk about you personally for just a little bit. I discovered that in 2015, you won an International Property Award. Let me just make sure I get this right. You won an International Property Award for Best Commercial Renovation and Redevelopment in the Americas. I believe it was like a mid-19th century building. Can you tell me about that project?
Yeah, that was a joy, to be honest, Joe. I didn't expect to win that prize. Let me just start off by saying that. Honestly, it was one of those things where I was 15 years into my career as a solo architect, and I thought, let me just do like a litmus test. How do I stand up to the international market? Because it's so secular here, right? As I said, it's so small. Yeah, we can read upon fantastic architects across the globe and see what they're doing, but how do I stand up in terms of quality assurance and just in terms of what I'm providing as a professional? And when it came back with the prize of the entire Americas, not just the Caribbean, I was blown away. Honestly, that was a really good surprise for me. But it was a joy. That was the second building that I revitalized. And so I did have a bit of experience the first time around in terms of what to do, what materials to use. And so it was just one of those things where the client always plays an important role with every project, right?
Right.
But if they don't believe in what you're telling them in terms of materiality, okay, so for example, those buildings would have been built out of coral stone blocks, okay, not concrete blocks.
Right.
For those who don't know, coral stone is, as the name stands, is coral. So putting cement on it, the moisture isn't going to be able to get out once it gets in. Okay, that's going to seal the concrete block, the coral stone block. So you have to use lime render, right? But that's not provided here. Even though we have coral stone, the plant that we had that's kind of exhausted, the quality isn't there. So I had to convince the client to bring in these materials so that the building would hold up longer and be better for his staff. Because basically, it was an old beach house, right, on the south coast of Barbados. It was a beach house for probably a bigger house that they had in the country. Okay, so this would be like a summer home, beach home for them. And it was being converted into an office. And so, that was the main purpose of the project. But the client was willing to, and he understood the fact that if he used concrete or cement on these walls, he'd be trapping the moisture in the building, and then everybody's going to be coming to work sick or calling in sick, say they can't work. Okay. So we have that. We've got double glazed windows to help with the heat build up when they transfer. But for me, it was more of a revitalizing the building and bringing it back to life, like breathing life back into these old buildings. It's a real joy. And so the detailing, the same gingerbread trimmings, the louvers, the hoods, the details on the stairs, and reusing and repurposing the wood that was already there. Perfect condition, by the way. No termites, nothing like that. So we were able to repurpose a lot of the wood that was within the building and use it for something else, or add to the balustrades going down the stairs on the inside, for example. So I think that was one of the main reasons we won, because we were able to not only repurpose the building, but reduce the embodied energy that it would have caused to rebuild it or repurpose it. And like I said, it was a nice surprise. It really was.
Do you still stay in touch with the clients in that particular project?
So, yes, exactly. So that client right now, we're doing another project as we speak, a 40-unit condo complex here in Barbados. So yes, the client and I are working together again.
Okay. Oh, that's fantastic. So clearly they were happy with your work. So that's
that's really the important thing for me, right? My motto is you're only as good as the last client. So you try to make sure that it's always a great experience.
Right on. Yeah, that's really cool. And congratulations for that. I want to talk a little, this is almost kind of a cheap question for an interviewer, but I really want to know the answer. So I'm doing it anyway. I'm going to take the lazy route and ask you this question. I noticed on your LinkedIn page, you regularly post things about like some of the giants of architecture. I know you don't go to LinkedIn that often, but when I looked back on the things you did post, it was often a tribute to some of the greats, right? The names that we all know. If you could collaborate with any architect, living or dead, who would they be and why?
Calatrava.
Okay. Well, why is that?
Again, that mix of engineering and architecture, I think for me, he's unique in that regards. I think the works that he produces are beautiful. They're organic. To me, they stand the test of time. I really respect his work. I enjoy his spaces that he creates, the sense, the volume, the light, materiality. Yeah, I would probably quit this for a year if I could just work under his wing. That'd be fantastic. Free of charge.
Of course, yeah. So it's interesting. The more I listen to you speak, there are architects who create these magnificent forms and hand it off to the engineers and say, no, make it work. All right. Now it's your role. But you don't do that. The make it work is very much part of what you offer as well. Is that a reasonable?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, again, I wish I could call myself a star architect. You get to a point in your career where if you're fortunate enough, you can just tell the engineers, just make it like, this is what I want, make it work. Like, I'm not interested. But I haven't reached that point yet in my career. And so, but I think with Calatrava, because he has the knowledge of both engineering and architecture, he's able to do a lot of these things in-house, or for himself. I did engineering. I did an undergrad in engineering first, but I wouldn't call myself an engineer. You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't do that at all. So I definitely rely on engineers to make what I'm designing work, but I do not give them anything that I know that they cannot do. So I use my knowledge of engineering to maybe stretch the envelope a little bit. I've had a couple of conversations with some engineers, and I had to come up with a different approach to it. And they're like, oh, okay, I'll get back to you on that. So I find that a lot of them are very, narrow-minded in terms of this is what they learned and this is it. So everything is a calculation, right? Whereas I might want to bend the rules a little bit more and, force them to come up with a more creative way to make something work. That has happened once or twice, but not on the scale like what Calatrava.
Right. Yeah, I've joked about this multiple times. Just before they give us our iron ring for engineering school in Nova Scotia, just before they do that, you have to undergo a surgery where they literally remove the right side of your brain. Just get all that artistic, get rid of it. Take it away. Leave that for the architects.
That's why engineers and architects are always at each other's throats.
Yeah, we just don't have that part of our brains left anymore. It's all gone. Let's break out the crystal ball. Let's talk about the future a little bit. I want to do that. Where do you think Barbadian architecture is headed? And I mean, like, which aspects will change and which aspects will probably hold or come back?
Well, right now, as I said before, the modern design seems to be the new wave, And like I said, I've done it once or twice for clients. But I think for the most part, especially with the same climate resiliency, you're seeing a lot of that traditional architecture coming back. maybe not as quickly as it went away, or I should say as quickly as modernism came in, but I believe that people are becoming more aware of what they should build in the tropics. But for right now, it's modernism, unfortunately. And I mean, I say that not like I don't like it. I think it's beautiful, and I think it's, it has its place. I'm not convinced that the amount of it or the volume that we're getting is worth or in the right direction in terms of what we're doing. What's happening too now is high rises. Okay, so we're running out of land mass. It's a small island, like I said before. So you're seeing more multi-story projects coming on stream now. So you're getting that. And that's not a traditional Caribbean way of living, okay? Because, people grow up, they have their backyard, they have a farm, they have a little garden in the back, maybe, and they can just run around and have their space. But space is becoming limited, okay? So there are a number of multi-story townhouses being built at the present moment, especially along the coast. The main drive, that's basically what's happening now.
Imagine a building where natural light flows freely, solar heat gain is under control, and comfort is unmatched. With Solera translucent glazings, you can create spaces that work better, feel better, and deliver lasting value. Learn how at advancedglazings.com.
Right on. I want to explore something you said just a little bit. So with the modern design, are there ways that it's just truly dissonant, like in terms of like physically, in terms of the weather, in terms of moisture, like where the modern design just isn't exactly the right thing and you have to do some adaptations to make it work in Barbados?
Well, I think if you have a good architect on board, somebody who's familiar with building or designing in the Caribbean, they should be able to mitigate most of those issues, right? You won't find hoods over windows, for example, but maybe there's a detail that they create where the drip edge is not seen, because you don't want any water hugging the wall and coming towards the window if you can prevent it. Not that all houses have hoods. I'm just saying that with the modern design, you want to have some protection over the doors, an external door. What you're seeing are these kind of flat slabs more than a pitched roof. But, maybe they have internal roll-down shutters or built-in roll-in shutters on the outside where, the press of a button and a hurricane shutter can secure that window. Or maybe the glass is impact resistant, The technology is improving to the point now where, you can get window panes that can withstand higher forces when impacted. So technology for sure, I would say modern technology is being implemented even into the traditional homes, again, because of that. So there are ways that you can work around it. If you have a flat roof, you just got to make sure that your grade is on point, you've got proper drainage, you use waterproofing materials. All that's improving every year. There's always something that comes out that's better than a few years ago. So those kinds of things are being implemented from a climate resiliency point of view.
Let me be a tiny bit of a troublemaker. Is there anything happening in architecture in Barbados where you just go, oh, no, why is this happening? Without insulting somebody or whatever. Can you tell me if there's any trends that you see, practice that you see that just makes you just, why is this happening?
Again, it's me. I don't want to be the harp on it, but be the modern style.
Right.
It's just so rampant.
Oh,
and I think the issue that I found with a lot of them, at least 70% of them, they're not beautiful. To me, the proportions are off. You've got probably too much concrete facing the east.
Right.
They want to blank that wall completely because they probably want something really beautiful on the inside. I don't know. But I find the massing is off in a lot of the homes, the balance between light and solid. I find that for me, if I were doing, and the ones I've done, I try to create more of a harmonious balance with the material choices. And I find that a lot of times when you're driving by these homes, it's just plain concrete sometimes, which is to me not the best material.
It's not interesting.
Yeah.
There's nothing interesting about it.
Yeah. They don't seem to take advantage of their locale, So if I'm on a hill, and I have a fantastic view to the west. Watching sunsets is amazing. But let's say your entry is the eastern side. Everything's being oriented in like faced in one direction and not taking into impact, well, in order for this to have a natural ventilation, everything's so mechanical now, right? It's like living in a temperate climate where everything is always air conditioned. But why? If you're in the tropics, you have that natural breeze blowing. It's so cool. Why put a burden on the system with having your electricity bill on pulling from resources unnecessarily?
Oh, and it feels so nice to breathe the natural air. It's just a lovely.
There's no doubt about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So those are the kind of things that get my goat. I wish that clients would be, I mean, I'm not sure what the process is. I don't know what communication is with their architect, but that's the kind of stuff that really bothers me. When I see a house that could have been better. I mean, they're spending millions of dollars, huh?
Right.
Millions.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. All right. We're getting close to the end, Peter. There's a question that I ask every guest, every single guest, and I ask them to answer it from whatever perspective that they'd like. Okay. And the question is, what makes a great building?
For me, what makes a great building, to be honest with you, Joe, is when I walk into a space and I feel comfortable, in all regards. So just looking at the materials used, quality of air, the quality of light. So I use feng shui, my principal design practice, right? Like when I'm getting it down to the basics, I use feng shui principles. And a lot of it has to do with the flow of energy within a space and how it impacts its inhabitants. Hence the name of my company, to be honest. So right. I think when you walk into a space, it should really relate to the individual or to people, whether it's a hotel lobby, an office reception area, front door to your home, or a courtyard entry before you reach to the front door of your home. Those kinds of things, to me, make a great building. And how it relates to the human inhabitants, right? Texture, materials, colors, lighting, just the volume on how you create a space. So I think that's basically what architecture is all about, in my opinion. To me, that's the heart of it all.
I agree. That's very well stated. Before we go, what is your website? Tell us your website.
Okay. Yeah, well, it's habitatsdesigns.com, and everything's in there. You can contact me through the link there for LinkedIn, Instagram, and my email address. And I would say that's probably the major contact point for my new clients. They tend to Google me or my company, and they contact me through there.
Perfect. Do you have any exciting announcements, anything cool coming up that you'd like to share with us?
I mean, for me right now, I'm working on the biggest project I've ever done in my career, that 40 townhouse complex I told you about before. So that's exciting. Again, it's a multi-story. Like I said before, it's the 4 multi-story buildings within this complex. And so that, to me, that's the most exciting thing that I'm working on at the present moment. Looking forward to it. I also have a very small cottage where the clients want a vernacular, like a Bajan kind of exterior, vernacular Caribbean look on the outside, but they want a Scandinavian look on the inside.
Okay.
So that twist of material choices again, that's really exciting for me. And I'm in my element right now, to be honest.
Very cool. Peter, thank you so much. I know this was a bit of a scramble for you this morning, and you did a wonderful job. Hugely appreciate it. Again, thank you. And you take care.
To meet another TONS graduate. So yeah, by all means.
For sure. Yeah, let's keep in touch for sure. I want to see some pictures of that design when you've got it. Sure. Okay. Joe at advancedglazings.com. That's how you get a hold of me. All right. Okay, my friend. Take care.
Very much. Take care.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Better Buildings for Humans. For more information on the world's best light diffusing and highly insulating glass glazing, please visit advancedglazings.com.